Okay, quick poll. How many of you actually have bees? Beautiful. Okay, and how many are not yet with bees? Not yet with bees. Don't have bees yet. Okay. Perfect. Okay, great. Real quick, I started on top bars. That's me with my first top bar. I was terrified of my bees. I taped my ankles and my wrists every day that I went out. It's a different story now. Dodie asked me to teach this class, and she said, getting started keeping bees. So I always take great umbrage with, I always recraft whatever they tell me to teach. I don't know if that frustrates the heck out of TBA or they get excited about it, but we are not going to do this is a top bar hive, this is a Langstroth hive, this is a feeder situation today, because that information is out there. There's 8,000, I have an online class, I will give you a very deep discount on it. There's a million ways to learn about those very basics. Buy a book, look online. What I'm going to tell you today is going to be much more useful for you, because the bad news that I have to share with you is that 80% of beekeepers don't make it past their first few years. Is this a real stat? I don't know. It may be made up, but I don't think it's probably that far off from the truth. Why is that? I think that's probably because there's a really, really steep learning curve. There's probably some unrealistic expectations about honey. We're going to talk about what you shouldn't be focused on this year. Honey is one of them. It can get real expensive real fast, and you have to spend all of the money up front when you don't know very much. Bees sting. Do you guys know that? They sting, and it kind of hurts. And yes, I've been stung thousands of times, probably. Easy. I don't itch. I don't swell. I don't get red. That's great, but I'll tell you what, it still hurts. But the good news is that you are here, which means that I don't think you're going to be part of that 80%, because investing in learning and understanding up front that we are talking about a superorganism that is incredibly nuanced. Beekeeping is highly regional, it's highly specific, and we are dependent on the weather in all sorts of ways that normal farmers, if you will, aren't. But because of that, and you're here and you understand that, I'm really excited for all of you, whether you already have bees or you're just getting started. So we are going to talk today, again, not that like very, very basic, this is a frame. We're not going to do bee biology, but rather I'm going to tell you all the things that I wish I had known my first year keeping bees. And whether you have bees or you don't have bees, I really hope that it's going to be really, really useful to you. I wish I had 2 hours with you. I have 50 minutes. Which is not enough time for me to really share what I want, but I'm going to do my best. I'll spend some time at the end answering questions, so I'm going to keep a really close eye on my time here. Okay, first, let's talk about what to do before you buy bees. If you already have bees, that's okay. This is still really important for you to know. So before you ever buy bees, I need you to go and learn about bee biology. Bee biology is where beekeepers so often go wrong. They get a hive. They don't know anything. They don't know about a queen. They don't know why she's there. They don't know what she does. They don't know what happens when they lose her. They don't know how to know if they lose their queen. So I cannot stress to you, I am writing a beekeeping book. It'll be out next year. Look for it. We don't even get into the beekeeping for 3.5 chapters. Like, I don't even talk about it until we talk about time commitment, what this is going to cost, bee biology, and honeybee nutrition. And then I will start to tell you how to be a beekeeper. Number 2, understand the commitment, the time, and the financial. Money's relative. What's expensive to you might not be expensive to me. I will tell you, I am cheap. I am a cheap beekeeper. I can do a lot of things with a stick in a beehive. But bees are really a lot more than you would think they would be, right? We're talking about several $100s at least for a box of insects, right? And if something goes wrong and you have to buy bees every year, you're talking about a few $100s a month over the course of a year if you have 4 or 5 hives, right? So understanding the time commitment and cost, if you share your email with me, I'll share, especially for you new folks, I'll share a little worksheet that I have that will help you price out, like tell you what it's going to cost you. Happy to share that with you for free. The time commitment, it's not so much in the bees, it's in the learning. So don't think you're going to be going out every day to check your bees. You're not. But most days you're going to be like, what in the hell are they doing? Like, it's just really the time commitment is in the learning. It's looking online, it's reading books, it's talking to other beekeepers, it's going to bee schools. Commit to starting at least 2 hives. If you're a beekeeper and you have 1 hive, I hope you hold on till next spring, but definitely invest in a second. If you can afford 2, if you can afford 4, maybe do 3 or 4. I wouldn't go too big after that unless you really have to for your ag exemption or something. But starting with 2 hives is really important because you can share resources between the 2. If you start 1 hive and something goes awry, and there's so many things that can go awry, and you don't have anything to share, I can share brood babies, right? I can share nectar, I can share pollen, I can share honey. You can even share bees to some extent between hives. It's really beneficial for you, so at least start with 2. Do not buy bees in the mail. I'm going to say it again. Do not buy bees in the mail. Has anyone bought bees in the mail and they showed up dead? It's not great, right? Did you get your money back? No. Do not buy bees in the mail. Every year for the last 3 years, there's one company. I'm not in the business of talking bad about other bee companies. I'm not going to tell you who they are. They're not in Texas. But they have sold lots of bees via the mail, and they all died because the Postal Service is not in a great place, you guys. And they won't give you your money back. And they're supposed to be insured, and they won't. Do not buy bees via the mail. You have amazing bee breeders here in Texas. I'm not a breeder because I do honey. You do one or the other in beekeeping. But we do sell for another breeder. They're fantastic. You've got Bee Weaver, Ashley Ralph sells bees. You've got so many breeders right here in this building that you can buy from right here in Texas. Know your breeder. Ask them questions. Know them, ask them questions. If you don't know the questions to ask, go up to them and say, tell me about your bees and why they're really good and why I should start with your bees, and just listen to what they say. And finally, find a way to get hands-on help. The best way to learn about bees is in a hive with another beekeeper. I know that can be challenging to find. I'm going to share some ways for you to do that later. But find a way for you to put your head in as many hives as possible, even before you get bees, if that's possible. Okay. We're going to get into the 10 big mistakes that beekeepers make their first year, but some other just kind of misunderstandings. I don't like the word mistake. I don't like that word. Mistakes is just something that you don't understand yet, right? So these are misunderstandings. Number 1, parts of a hive, the nomenclature. It's like what all the things are called. So those wooden things that go in Langstroth hives, they're called frames. They're not called slats. I have a student that calls them slats. She's called them slats for 5 years. I can't figure out a way to get her to stop calling them slats. This is not me being a snob. The reason this is important is because when a beekeeper comes up to me and they say, I'm using a queen excluder and it's not working, and they're telling me this whole problem, and I'm like, what is she talking about? And then we find, she's not talking about a queen excluder. She's talking about a hive reducer. 2 different things, okay? So it's not that I'm snobbish. It's that it's hard to get help if you aren't speaking the same language, particularly like on Facebook groups, right? Facebook groups are a great way to get help, but you got to know the right words of what you're talking about before you can help someone understand your problem. Okay, my bees are so nice I don't need a smoker. This is probably true for your first year because you know what you have is a little baby lion cub, and they're cute and cuddly and you can pet them and you know what happens to cubs? They grow up into lions and they can be really mean. Now, most bees are very docile most of the time, but I promise you, I can get in a hive, no veil, no gloves, do it. I usually cover my face because money maker, right? But a sting to the eye is life-changing, okay? I work with very little gear, and I'm very, very comfortable doing it. I have a suit. It is within arm's length all the time because I never know. Even my bees, I know which ones are mean and which ones are nice. Even the ones that are nice can have a bad day. They're allowed. I have a suit within arm's length all the time. And even if you only use that suit 1 day a year, it just paid for itself. I don't care if it costs $180. It paid for itself because has anyone in this room been stung 3 dozen times? Charlie has. I know Charlie has. Marie has, and I have, and it is not fun. Okay. Let's see. So use your bee smoker. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but use your smoker. Pollen does not equal honey. This is a mistake that I see even experienced beekeepers make, and y'all, it's kind of embarrassing. Pollen does not equal honey. You know what equals honey? Nectar. Nectar, nectar, nectar. Just because your bees are bringing in pollen does not mean they are making honey. One is not the other. Pollen is available, honestly, all the way through December in Texas, but nectar is not. So please know the difference in that. On that note, I'm teaching a class on bee nutrition after lunch. I strongly recommend you come. You can inspect your hives too little. You can inspect your hives too often. How often you inspect your hives is going to be driven a lot by your philosophy. I'm a more natural kind of hands-off beekeeper. I check once every 3 weeks even still. But know that getting in every day can cause your hives to abscond. So I know it's really fun and you're excited when you get your bees, but please resist the urge. Checking not frequently enough. You are absolutely, if that's what you want to do, bees don't need us, right? But if you spent money on those bees and you want to keep those bees, I recommend that you check them. By the way, in the industry, people call those bee havers. If someone calls you a bee haver, they are not giving you a compliment, so just know that. You can feed your bees too much. You can feed your bees too little. We're going to come back to that here in just a minute. And bees cannot build comb without carbohydrates. We're going to talk more about that here in just a minute. Okay, we're going to jump in. I have top biggest mistakes that I think beekeepers make every year. I'm going to go through them one by one. Number 1, learn to spot eggs. Anyone in here have stellar egg spotting skills? Be proud. Understanding the status of your queen is really important. Is she laying? Do you have a laying queen? Well, if you determine that by looking for your queen, it's not enough information. One, if you go through your hive and try to find your queen every time, that's a good skill set to have, but it's actually not one that you're going to use that often. But even if you find her, it doesn't mean she's laying, okay? Looking for eggs is what's important, because if we see eggs, we've had a queen laying in the last how many days? Does anybody know? 3, yes. Because an egg hatches into a larva on day 3 and some change, 3.5, okay? So if you see an egg, you know at least sometime in the last 3 days you've had a laying queen. That's pretty good assurances that we're queen right, okay? So that's what you're looking for. Now, spotting eggs is challenging. This is them. They're tiny. I mean, people say, oh, they look like grains of rice. Yeah, if a grain of rice was cut into like 8 pieces, okay? They're super, super small. First and foremost, turn around. Okay, if the sun's over here, turn around. You cannot spot eggs if you're holding your frame between you and the sun. Okay, it's backlit, can't see them. Turn around, use the sun. It's a giant flashlight. Over your shoulder. If you wear glasses, wear your glasses. I can't tell you how many beekeepers I get into hives with, and they're like, oh, I need my glasses. Well, take your glasses. Use the sun. It's kind of like those posters. Some of you are too young for this, but you remember those posters in the 90s? You go to the mall, and there's like supposed to be a whale jumping in the blue sea or whatever, and you're like, what? And then you squint your eyes like a certain way, and all of a sudden you see the whale jumping in the blue sea. That is what it's like to spot eggs. Once you see them once, you're like, oh, that's what I've been looking for this whole time. This is when it's helpful to have another beekeeper. My last trick I'll tell you is hold your frame where you suspect you'll see eggs. Take your phone. It has to be dead parallel with the frame. And use your cell phone and take photos. Move into the shade. Blow up the photo. This is how we got this photo. And you can see the eggs. Okay. Not feeding your packages or nukes enough. Okay. Or too much. When you install a package or a nucleus colony, bees cannot build beeswax without carbohydrates. Okay. They cannot. So if you're naturally in what's called a nectar flow, when there's lots of nectar available, great. But chances are you're probably before that. Usually you get your bees before the big nectar flow. Depends on where you are. We're feeding. I'm a natural beekeeper. I don't like to feed bees for a lot of reasons, but you must feed your package or your nuke. You must. If you don't, they can't build beeswax comb. Then your colony stays teeny small, okay? The queen has nowhere to lay. She can't produce more young. Then you don't have enough foragers to go collect food for the winter, and it rapidly gets out of control in a way that you don't want. So feed your bees. Feed your package or your nuke. I'm going to be super prescriptive here. 1 gallon of sugar water a week until they've drawn out enough comb to at least fill a deep hive body or the equivalent with beeswax comb. Might even feed till they fill the next box too. Not until they're actually storing the syrup necessarily, but until they've just drawn the comb out. This is drawn comb. Know that foundation does not equal drawn comb, and it's not a shortcut. Just because you got beeswax or plastic foundation, that doesn't do anything for the bees, except provides a guide for them to build on. Okay, so using foundation is not a shortcut, doesn't mean they're good to go. They have to have the beeswax comb built. When I say drawn out, that's what I mean, built on the frame. Not lighting or using your smoker appropriately. We touched on this a little bit earlier. What happens here is bees communicate via pheromones. The pheromone that bees release that communicates danger is actually the same pheromone that they extract to put into fake banana candy. For years, everyone told me it smelled like bananas. I was like, no, it doesn't smell like bananas at all. But you know what it does smell like? Fake bananas. The reason's actually a pretty interesting story. So years ago, I think maybe in the late 1800s, the species of banana that we all ate is the species of banana that they extracted this smell from. That banana is now extinct. So if you also are like, this doesn't smell like bananas, but it smells like Laffy Taffy, that is why. It's a different species of banana that's not available to eat anymore. Anyway, learn to light your smoker and use it. You can get away with it your first year, usually if you've got a new package of bees or a new nuke. But by year 2 or beyond, one bad day, y'all, I had a beekeeping student who never learned how to light her smoker right, and she called me because she went out. She didn't light her smoker well. It went out. She kept inspecting. She got stung a few dozen times, and she would never go back in her hive again. It can just turn you away from the hobby. So learn how to use your smoker. On YouTube, I've got a great 4-part series video of how to light your smoker. It's just like lighting a campfire, so check that out. But just know that you must know how to light your smoker, and grass in a smoker is not going to stay lit very long. It's great to get it going. That's what we call kindling, but basically firewood is what you want. And firewood sticks, you can buy smoker fuel. There's really no need. It is free and it is everywhere, all over the ground. Mesquite, oak, whatever you can find. But the smoker protects you and your bees, right? It doesn't bode well for them if they sting either. Okay, focusing too much on harvesting honey. We're not even going to talk about honey today. That's for later. Focusing too much on opportunistic pests. So there's a couple of different pests in your hive that are what we call opportunistic. Small hive beetle and wax moth are 2 of them. Wax moths, we're going to talk a little bit more about in a bit when we talk about preserving your beeswax comb when it's not in your hive. But no, these are opportunistic pests. Wax moths did not kill your hive. Didn't. Something else did, and they moved in. Saying wax moths killed my hive is like finding a dead raccoon and going, oh my God, the maggots killed the raccoon. Okay? So, keep your hives strong. Learn about keeping your hive strong and big and populated, and you won't have to worry about these. Misuse of queen excluders. I'm not going to go into that too deeply. If you don't know what a queen excluder is, don't even worry with it. Don't buy it. Don't use it. If you do have one and you know what it is and you know how to use it properly, great. This is just another tool that is not necessary. It can be beneficial, but honestly, I run a honey company and I don't use a one. So if you have them and you want to know how to use them, just maybe wait. There's so much more important stuff to learn that's not anything to do with queen excluders. Improper space management. So a beehive is like an accordion. They grow and retract throughout the year. Okay? So in the spring, we're in a growth period, right? They're growing. The queen is laying a lot of eggs because she needs a lot of bees to go out and collect all that food. Bees can only make honey a very short period of the time of year. Very, very short in most areas. And so she starts laying really early in the year because it takes 4 weeks before bees, after they hatch, after they emerge, before they become foragers and can go collect food, right? The old ladies are the food collectors. So she needs to start laying really early. By the time that nectar flow starts and nectar's available to make honey, she's got lots of bees available to go and collect that food. So the spring's a time of growth. In the summer is a time of retraction, or maybe we even shrink a little bit. Our queens respond to resources available in the ecology. So in the summer, there's not a lot going on, not a lot of pollen, not a lot of nectar. She will slow or maybe even stop her laying. So your colony will stay the same size or shrink. In the fall in Texas, we might grow a little bit again. And then when you go into winter, that is the biggest your colony will be until the next February, if not March. Okay. So the benefit again, bees don't need us, but the benefit of having a managed beekeeper for a colony is we can manage space. So think about giving your hive space in the growth period and taking space away during the times when they're going to shrink. So when we go to winterize hives, we make our hive, we make our hive as small as the colony needs, because again, the colony's only going to shrink as we move through winter. Oh, the big daddy, not thinking enough about varroa management. Okay, we could spend the whole rest of the day talking about varroa. Obviously, we're not going to do that. Just know it's something that you are going to have to deal with. You can't ignore it. If you buy what are called hygienic or VSH queens, you're probably not going to have to worry too much about it your first year. It doesn't mean it's a problem you never have to worry about, but it does all start with the bees that you are buying. I would recommend buying VSH queens when you buy your bees, but just know you just can't ignore it, okay? Not taking enough notes. This is so important. You think you'll remember, and you just won't. There's too much. You're learning so much every time you get in. I take notes on every single hive. I have 300 hives, and I take notes on every single hive. It's nothing like big and long and detailed, but I'm going to forget when I come back the next time. So please take notes. Take notes on when your nectar flow starts every year, when it stops, when your queen starts laying, coming out of winter. Like, this is all going to be helpful, because next year you can look back and go, oh, it was around this time last year that our nectar flow started. Maybe I should be thinking about adding more space to my hive. Okay. And then not knowing how to read your frames. Okay, so reading your frames basically is knowing what you're looking at on a frame. If we had an extra hour, I would do a session on that for you. The best way to do this is getting with a beekeeper that knows what they're doing and showing you what the heck you're looking at when you're in your hives. But knowing how to read your frames is really, really important to assess what's happening in your colony. So, oh, and a bonus. I gave you a bonus. Not learning about honeybee nutrition. The most common question that I get from beekeepers is, should I be feeding my bees? Well, I don't know. I don't know how big your colony is. I don't know if you're on a nectar flow. I don't know how much honey you have. I don't know if you're close to a nectar flow. I don't know anything. So when someone says, should I be feeding my bees? I ask them about 45 follow-up questions. And then I say, okay, well, maybe I think you should be feeding your bees. But the question is not, we should be learning about feeding bees first. We should be learning about honeybee nutrition first. How do you know if you should be feeding your bees if you don't know what the heck your bees eat and why they eat it? So again, really important to learn about honeybee nutrition. Okay, things that in 1 year you will wish you had learned and done now. So, drawn comb is golden, right? It is golden. So what I'm talking about is, let's say you had a hive fail. Well, it happens. It happens to all of us. Or we're winterizing our hives, and when we go to consolidate our hives, because again, we want to make our hive small, right? The actual woodenware to match the size of the colony. You've got all this extra comb, drawn comb. And this is true whether you do Warray hives or top bars or Langs. You want to protect this because it takes a lot of energy, a lot of nectar. Bees can only build beeswax comb when there's so much nectar in the ecology they can come back and start drawing comb and storing honey off of it. So before they can ever start making honey, they have to draw the comb. Okay? So if you don't protect it, this is what happens. Okay? This is where wax moths become an issue. Think of wax moths as like little, they're nature's cleanup crew. They do an important job. They'll come in and they just rip through. They tunnel through all of this comb. Anything where brood had been laid, eggs had been laid, the dark stuff, they're after the pollen and the little bits of that are left after a honeybee spins a cocoon. That's what they eat. So if you take comb out of your hive, has anyone been hit by a wax moth? I mean, I have. I will be the first to tell you. Anyone had this happen to them? Okay, it's only a matter of time. If you take your frames out and you don't store them properly, this is what happens. And now this is ruined. And if you had taken care of it, you can give this back to the hive later, and then you save them all this work and energy. And this is really how you start to increase your apiary size or make a lot of honey, is when you've got this extra comb in storage. It's really important when we talk about preventing swarming later to have the benefit of drawn comb. So if you have comb that you've pulled from your hive, if comb never had brood laid in it, you don't have to worry so much. So we know that. Do you see how on the edges here, how it's really light colored and yellow and the wax moths didn't touch it? There's nothing there for them. So our supers, our honeycomb, we don't have to worry about this so much. But where their brood was laid, you want to freeze your frames or your bars for 48 hours. That will kill, I'd do 72 if you can. That will kill any eggs that are already in the comb. But that's not everything, because if you take them out and then you just store them somewhere, even if it's in your house, you guys, I've had a wax moth infestation in my closet. It happens. You still got to protect it. So take it out of the freezer, defrost it. Don't put them away frozen, because then they're wet and then mold will grow. Defrost them, dry them out. And then you want to double bag them in bags or put them in an airtight container or leave them in the freezer. And you'll have the benefit of having the frames for future use. If you have a little damage, you can just cut out the affected area and still preserve the rest. You don't have to scrap the whole frame. So like this frame here, I could just cut out the middle and reserve the rest. It's worth it. If that happens to you, you'll notice all these cocoons on the woodenware. That's what this is here. You don't have to throw away the woodenware. It's going to leave divots in your woodenware. It's fine. Just cut out the cocoons and you can still use the woodenware. Okay. Yes, I mentioned the smoker again because it's that important. In a year from now, when you never learn how to use your smoker and your hive's actually really aggressive, you're going to be like, man, I wish I'd listened to Tara and learned how to light that smoker. Fed your bees more to start. Feeding your bees initially to get them established is so important to having a strong colony to go into winter. Now, what we didn't talk about that I was remiss was you can feed your bees too much. So feeding a gallon of 1-to-1 sugar to water, plain white table sugar, by weight or volume, it's close enough to be the same that it's fine. You can choose either. 1 gallon a week until they've drawn out the amount of comb that you want is really important. But don't make the mistake of going, well, if 1 gallon is good, then 3 gallons must be great. They'll take it. There's a good chance they'll take it. And then what will happen is you'll get what's called honey bound. They will backfill. They'll draw all the comb and they start filling it with syrup. And then your bees will swarm. I had a lady, not even 6 weeks after starting to package, her hive swarmed because she was feeding them 3 gallons of sugar syrup a week. And her argument was, well, they kept taking it, so I just kept feeding it to them, which is kind of, I had a baby not too long ago, and that's kind of how I feel about food in general. Like, if you keep giving it to me, I'm going to eat it. 1 gallon a week until they've drawn out the comb. This is an important one. Be really smart about your site setup. I am the first to admit I'm really bad about this. This is my apiary. Well, one of them. There's bees in there. You wouldn't know it because of all those bastard cabbage flowers all around, but be really smart about laying something down so you don't have to do weed whacking or weeding around your hives. Stones, you could pour concrete pad. I'm not a big fan of concrete, but stones, you can lay down some of that weed barrier. Cardboard will work somewhat, mulch, whatever, but just something so that you can get, the bees don't care, let's be clear, but for you to actually manage those colonies, you need to be able to get in there. I mean, this is just asking to step on a snake, or there's scorpions at this site. There's all kinds of things that you want to be able to visually see to work your bees. Okay, bee math. Bee math is really, 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 really important. I want you to remember 3 numbers. 3, 9, 21. 3, 9, 21. On day 3, a honeybee will hatch into, an egg will hatch into a larva. Okay, so it's laid. On day 3, the egg will hatch. On day 9, it's technically 9.5. We're rounding here. That larva will be capped with beeswax, and now we have a pupae starting to develop. And on day 21, she'll chew around the sides of the cell, and she emerges as an adult. Okay. This cycle is the same for queens and drones. It's just the number of days are different. I'll show you a visual of what that looks like in a minute. It is not as important for you to know about the drones and the queens now. In the future, you should know those cycles as well, because it's going to make you a much better beekeeper when you're making splits and things like that. But for your first year, 3, 9, and 21. As we mentioned, this is really important. So this is the others. So you can see here, everybody hatches on day 3. A queen, the cell's capped around day 8. For the drones, it's 10. And then the queen hatches on day 16, and then drones, it's a bit longer. Hatch. The technical term is emerge. I misuse that term all the time. And the drone will emerge on day 24. So here's actual photo of those. So you can see those are the eggs there. This is the teeny, teeny, teeny larva. They're swimming in the royal jelly. Older larva up there at the top just before they're capped. And then what's not in focus here is the that cap that's placed on by the worker bees. Okay. The reason this is important is, again, because if you understand this and you go queenless, you know to a shorter degree how long it's been since you had a queen. And the reason that's important to know is that then tells you what options you might have in front of you, okay? So in your hive, you see capped worker brood only, right? So we don't see any eggs, we don't see any larvae. Can someone tell me how long has it been? There's a range of days since I had a laying queen. Anyone? So the cap is placed on day 9.5, and they emerge on day 21. So how many days has it been? 9 to 21, okay? So if I see cap brood only and I don't see any eggs, something happened to my queen between 9 and 21 days ago. Okay. Later, it will become important for you to understand the cycle of the queen, because then you can start to assess where they are in their. A queenless hive will rear a new queen as long as they have eggs to do so. You can assess where they are in their queen rearing process. But this is just really important foundational math for y'all to understand. If a hive goes queenless, what will happen, as long as they had worker bee eggs, so there's no such thing as a queen egg. There's drone eggs and there's worker bee eggs. As long as there's a worker bee egg in there, as soon as that egg hatches into a larva, they feed that bee a little bit of a different diet. Everybody gets what's called royal jelly for the first 3 days, but would-be queens get a whole lot more of it and for longer, whereas workers and drone larvae get switched to a diet of pollen after a few days. So yes, they will take care of it themselves. And it's actually from the day that they start rearing queens, 30 days for the process to be completed. This is bonus math for you guys, because it takes 16 days for a queen to emerge. And then it takes her a few days to get out and do her mating flights, 3 or 4 days for her mating flights to occur. Once she gets back, it's 3 or 4 days before she actually starts laying. But from the time that they start rearing a queen until you should see new eggs is 30 days. So if you know, okay, it's been between 9 and 21 days since I last had a queen, and then you know the queen cycle, and you say, oh, well, I've got capped queen cells, so I know that I went queenless between 1 and 8 days ago. You can start to narrow down the time period of how long it's been, and then start to figure out, okay, I should start seeing eggs no later than this date. Because if they aren't successful, they can't do it again. They don't have any more eggs left. You either have to give them a frame of eggs from another hive or give them a bee from a breeder that you can buy. So there was a question. Does that answer your question? Okay. The question over here. They are not. That's a good one for this presentation. Drones are not bad. They get such a bad rap, but they are not bad. So there's this notion with beekeepers that we've been trained to see drones and think that there's something wrong. They're not. Drones are really important, because that's how, if you were to go queenless, you need drones in that they don't mate with their own drones, right? Your hive is not going to mate with their own drones, your queen. But if you go queenless, you need drones out there somewhere for her to mate, or she doesn't get mated and she can't come back and lay fertilized eggs. And so they are really important. They get a bad rap for 2 reasons. One, they don't contribute to your own hive. And so there is this notion that they're freeloaders and we don't want them. But I will tell you, I want drones in my apiaries because I let all my hives requeen themselves. So those drones being out there, and I got good genetics. I want everybody to have my bees genetics. They're good genetics. And then the second is because they're drain on hive resources, right? But the fact of the matter is drones can really go in any hive they want. So just because people will cut out all the drones in their hive, doesn't mean you're not going to have drones in your hive. And the second is because they have a longer cycle, Varroa might have to have brood to breed, and they love drones because they get 3 extra days to hang out in there and like have sex and then produce all of the mite babies. And so a lot of people, Lauren will probably talk about this, participate in what's called drone culling, cutting out the drones during times of the year when we have higher mite counts, because if Varroa have the option, they're going to mate in the drone cells instead of the workers. So that's why they get a bad rap. But the thing about drones is you're going to see them in your biggest, strongest hives. Like a weak hive is not going to rear drones. They just don't have, they won't. They just don't have the ability to do it. There is also this other scenario that I must at least mention, because if I don't, you're going to leave this room and someone's going to tell you about it and you're going to be like, Tara lied to us. She didn't tell us about this. There is something called a lane worker hive, where if a queen isn't mated, so like, let's say we all cut our drones because we think drones are bad, and we cut all the drones out of the hives, and there's no drones for these queens to mate. And my hive goes queenless, and my queen goes out, and there's no drones for her to mate. She cannot lay fertilized eggs. Fertilized eggs are what produce worker bees. Unfertilized eggs are what make drones. So an unmated queen can lay drones, right? But you can't lay workers. So drones are actually super critical for your hive because they're the way that she can actually lay fertilized eggs. Have I confused you? We good? Okay. I couldn't tell if it was confused or you were in shock. Okay. But drones are not bad. Now, I do a little drone culling. Like, I don't need my hive to have 5 frames of drones, and like the strong season, I'm like, no, you guys, let's like get it together, and I might cull some. But so if you came out and you had only drones in your hive and that's all your queen was laying, that's a way in which all drones could be indicative of a bigger problem. So those are the 3 things that are really, the reason drones get a bad rap. But they're critically important because every one of the queens in your hives had to mate with those drones in order for her to produce worker bees. Yeah. Yes. That's right. That's right. They don't do anything for your hive. But we're part of the greater good here, you guys. Yes. So what you do in your hive is up to you. But I let all my hives requeen themselves. And so I want good drones out there flying around to mate with those queens. But drones in themselves are not bad. There was a question right here. Yes. Ooh, you were advanced. Okay. So there's a green frame that you can buy. This is part of integrated pest management, where the foundation is plastic and it's the bigger cells. And the idea is it encourages them to build drone cells on it. And then when they lay, you can take that out, cut it off, cull the drones, and then put it back in. The idea is that you're controlling, you know what's going to happen, and you're taking control over the problem. It's effective, but you got to watch that frame really carefully, because if you don't, and then all the drones just hatch out, you're just breeding mites, right? But it is effective. But from the time that you put it in, doesn't mean that there's going to be drones from 24 days from now. They have to draw the comb, and she has to lay, and then it's 24 days from then. So you have to like inspect and watch it really carefully. Your question. Yeah. You can. I could fit 4 on this table. In fact, I like my hives like reasonably close to one another because there's a lot of sharing and moving things around. And so I'd actually recommend not doing one here and then 150 yards away and 150 yards away. They're all still, unless you're putting your hives miles away from one another, they're all competing for the same forage. So you could put them, a few feet from one another. Mm-hmm. Southeast is best if all options are available to you, because you want the sun to hit the front of that hive. They do get out of bed earlier. I used to think it was not true, but I did some A/B testing and it is true. They do get out of bed earlier. But if you have a really small lot, or you live like in the city and doesn't work for you, it's not that big of a deal. Yes. So your bees are not going to visit any of that. There's nothing, well, the cotton they will. They're not going to visit the wheat. The problem, what you're concerned about, is the drift. And so I don't know how much farming we're talking about, but if you know those farmers and you can at least ask what they're spraying, how often they're spraying it, and when, then you can do your research and kind of assess. But what you're concerned about is your bees being out and about and coming into contact with that pesticide when it's being sprayed. So like they're not going to be on the wheat, but drift can still happen. Yeah. Okay. A few final tips. Keep bees for the experience, not the honey. That doesn't mean that honey's bad. I mean, I sell honey for a living. But if you do it for the experience and you're in it to like really make the best decisions and choices for the health of the hive, the great fact is that you will get more honey as a result. Like all things being equal, if you're just doing it to try to get honey, you're probably not going to be as successful. But if you're doing it to keep a strong, healthy hive, those are the bees that make the most honey. Touch as many hives as you can. Acknowledge and accept right now that it's nuanced. It's tricky, you guys. This is not easy. I don't like to use the word hard because it's got such a negative connotation, but beekeeping's real tricky. But I think that's what makes it so interesting and fun. And the best way to learn beekeeping is from an experienced beekeeper. I'll share a few ways about how to do that here in just a minute. But find a community, whether it's online or like you're here. We've got a community right here, right? Meet 5 people today, meet 3 people today that's in your area. Go home, work your bees together. If they have 2 hives and you have 2 hives and you work your hives together, you have literally doubled your experience by the end of the year. And I have one just bonus fun one for you. Put all the frames back every time. Has anyone not put all the frames back every time and seen what happens? I'm looking at my gal in solidarity back here. Have you done this yet? No. Okay. This is what happens. So this guy didn't put a frame in the bottom box. And you see, and they don't go, oh, Tara forgot to put a frame. That's okay. We'll wait for her. They build comb. And this actually is pretty cool and easy to fix. But it can be not easy to fix. I helped a guy last week that had 3 or 4 hives that hadn't been touched in over a year. And we went out and 3 of the 4 had boxes on top that no frames were in. We couldn't even get into the hive, right? It's just they've done, comb is just everywhere. So put all the frames back every time. If you do this, you leave this frame out here or your bar out of your top bar, and then your bees get on a nectar flow, you're just asking for trouble. I have time for a few more questions. Follow us on social media. We're at Two Hives. It's on that card. We do classes. Like I say, we're just east of Austin. We do classes and experiences and honey classes and tours and all sorts of things. I do have a beekeeping apprenticeship program. That's what Milton comes from, he and his wife. It's a 6 Saturday program. Not to toot my own horn, you guys, but it is phenomenal, and we eat very well. So if you're interested in that, I have people come from all over the country for it. I've had people come from North Carolina. 1 day a month, you get to see all of the seasons of beekeeping. If that's of interest, we can chat. I will be happy to give you a little discount off of that. It's very fun. Questions? Most important questions left. Yes. 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 Oh, good question. Okay, so if you have an 8-frame box or a 10-frame box, if you do a laying, they come in sizes, right? She said some people put 9 frames in the box, and that is true. And in an 8-frame, some people put 7. In your honey supers, so up where they're going to start putting honey, it's not a bad idea. Brood comb, they make the same width. I would recommend putting all the frames in your brood box. But up in your supers, they love to build their honeycomb fatter, and sometimes you can't get the frames out because they build them so fat. Running 1 frame less is not a bad idea. Evenly space the frames across the box. And then when you go to harvest, if you're extracting and you go to cut the lid off, when the comb extends beyond the frame, it's so much easier to extract. So yes, great tip. I could probably have time for one more question. Yes. Yes. This is the speech that I gave at the top of every Intro to Beekeeping course. There's lots of ways to do it. There's a lot of ways to keep bees. With very few exceptions, I will always share with you what I do, what others do, why they might do it differently. I am not a beekeeper that's like, if you don't do it my way, you're going to kill your bees. There are a lot of people out there like that. That is not my way. There's space for all of us, no matter whether you're left or right on the spectrum of more treatment, less treatments. There's space for all of us in there. Find your own philosophy. It will change over time. Ask 10 different beekeepers. You'll get a lot of different answers, but then feel free to decide for yourself what works for you and your bees. And find someone, if you're going to find a mentor, that has that philosophy and is open to you trying different things, because that's how we learn as we try. Okay? Am I done? I'm done. Thank you guys. You're great.